Going back and watching Hulk Hogan's pre-NWO days in WCW is really fascinating to me. Hulkamania was synonymous with the World Wrestling Federation throughout the 80s and early 90s, and the WWF's main event scene was built around Hogan during a period of significant company growth. For many, Hulk Hogan joining WCW and wrestling for what many diehards saw as the enemy was both shocking yet very intriguing. While Hogan was dominating the WWF with similar larger-than-life superstars, WCW fought to maintain a sense of tradition. It didn't always work out that way because there were people in charge who wanted WCW to become more WWF-esque, but the purest of WCW fans generally enjoyed a no-nonsense wrestling show without cartoony and over-the-top characters. For many NWA and WCW fans, the WWF was seen as a company that presented kiddie wrestling shows, and, to a certain extent, those WCW fans were right. We shouldn't overlook the fact that WCW's biggest babyface at the time wore colourful tights, had his face painted and referred to his fans as the Little Stingers, but still, generally speaking, the WWF did seem to specifically target the young demographic, while WCW would put on matches that an older audience would maybe appreciate too. Both companies had success, but it was Hulk Hogan who helped launch the WWF into orbit with his matches against the likes of Andre the Giant, Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior. And through this whole lucrative WWF run, Hulk Hogan's character didn't change. Throughout it all, he wore the yellow and red. He was the real American who fights for the right of every man. The idea here was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and indeed, for the longest time, Hulkamania wasn't broke. The news that Hogan signed with WCW in 1994 sent shockwaves throughout the wrestling world, and it became one of the biggest stories of the year. But those traditional WCW fans who didn't care all that much for New York wrestling weren't sold on the idea. And seeing as Hogan and WCW still thought that Hulkamania wasn't broke, Hogan would enter the company still talking about taking your vitamins and saying your prayers while decked out in the classic yellow and red gear. WCW fans were just getting the big WWF guy, and what's maybe worse, he was booked to destroy WCW legend Ric Flair in his first match while capturing the WCW Heavyweight Championship. Let's not exaggerate things either though. If you watch Bash at the Beach 1994 from Orlando, Florida, you'll see an audience who were jumping for joy when Hogan defeated Flair, and the crowd celebrated alongside Hogan after the final bell. But the most vocal of WCW fans, the ones who were there for years, the ones who bought the After magazines and collected the tapes, they weren't sold on Hogan. And when Hulk Hogan was booked to wrestle in Atlanta or the Carolinas, that vocal minority became the vocal majority. Showing their inability to read the crowd and predict where things were going, WCW doubled down with the creation of the Three Faces of Fear and then the Dungeon of Doom, a group of villainous bastards who arguably were more cartoony and ridiculous than the villains the WWF presented on their TV shows. The Dungeon of Doom were specifically put together to feud against Hulk Hogan. Their mission was to end Hulkamania once and for all, and some of the promos and pre-tapes that aired during this time period would become infamous because they really were that bad.
There's no Hulkamaniacs here!
Hogan would maintain rivalries with the Dungeon of Doom and the Four Horsemen during the early days of WCW Nitro, and the reactions Hogan received on live TV were getting more and more negative as time went on. You can understand fans cheering for Flair and the Horsemen in the Carolinas, but when fans started cheering for Kevin Sullivan over Hulk Hogan on episodes of Nitro, then things were starting to get bad. I must reiterate though, there were fans who still cheered for Hogan, but it was a far cry from Hogan's heyday and even a far cry from Bash at the Beach 1994. The boos seemed to catch Hogan off guard sometimes, and it's unclear if it was Hogan or Bischoff who came up with the idea for Hulkamania to turn to the dark side for a little while, and it's unclear if the experiment was going to lead to something more substantial, but I do believe that the fans' negative reaction towards Hogan drove him to do something different with the character. The thing is, the evil Darkside Hulk Hogan felt like more cartoony nonsense, and nobody bought into it. It confused fans more than anything else, and it came across as so bizarre that it actually became funny. Let's take a look at how it all went down. This is WCW Blunder, Darkside Hulk Hogan. So, we've established Hogan's main enemies in WCW, the Horsemen and the Dungeon of Doom. Hulk had some friends though, mainly Sting and the Macho Man Randy Savage. At Fall Brawl 1995, Hogan, Sting, Macho and Lex Luger took on the Dungeon of Doom consisting of the Shark, the Zodiac, Kamala and Ming. If Hogan's team won, he'd get 5 minutes all alone with Kevin Sullivan inside the cage, but during those 5 minutes, the Giant came out and he attacked Hulk Hogan, snapping his neck in the process. The pay-per-view ended with Hulk's teammates surrounding him looking very concerned and calling for help. 2 weeks later on Monday Nitro, Hogan appeared in a pre-taped interview wearing a neck brace, and he says he'll be ready to go again soon. He challenges Giant here to the infamous Monster Truck sumo match at Halloween Havoc, but not only that, Hulk grants the Giant a title shot at the pay-per-view if he can survive the chaos of the Monster Truck match. Hogan was wearing his black cross here along with his usual gold cross, and he says once he beats the Giant and, quote, lays him down to rest next to his father, in reference to Andre the Giant. Remember, WCW tried to say the Giant was Andre's son, but yeah. Once Hogan lays the Giant to rest next to Andre, Hulk says the dark cloud that's hanging over his head will pass him by. Hogan removes the black cross while saying this line. To be honest, you really wouldn't think anything was gonna come of this. It's just another Hogan promo filled with Hoganisms, for lack of a better term. But then, the next week on Nitro, Hulk lost his superpowers when he got his mustache shaved off. You guys who watch Reliving the War may remember all this, but it's worth a second look for sure. It's just so ridiculous. Hulk goes to the ring for an interview with Mean Gene, still wearing the neck brace. Hogan says he spent time with a little Hulkamaniac who was getting ready for a lung transplant, and the kid ordered Hogan to take on the Giant. Hogan plans on finishing the job before Halloween Havoc, so he announces he's gonna go look for the Giant right here on Nitro. Hulk leaves the ring, he's giving fans high fives in the front row, but then this old lady right here throws powder in Hogan's face, the dastardly old bitch. The granny starts hitting Hogan with her walking stick as the Giant and the Zodiac make their way to the ring. We learned that the old lady was actually Kevin Sullivan, and the Giant snaps Hogan's neck one more time. Surely Hulk's head would have fallen off with all this neck abuse, but wait, there's more. Kevin Sullivan shaves off Hogan's mustache in the middle of the ring, an act that shocks Eric Bischoff on commentary, but it makes Bobby Heenan and the fans at home laugh their asses off. The American males and the Nasty Boys try to put a stop to this, but they're no match for the Giant and the Zodiac. Hogan's been embarrassed on live TV. How would he respond to this next week on Nitro? Well, he would wear all black and he would embrace his dark side. It's almost like the mustache kept Hogan on the straight and narrow. Hulk didn't appear on the next episode of Saturday Night. The Giant and Sullivan cut a promo instead where the big man said Hogan's going down at Halloween Havoc. Pretty standard stuff. On the next episode of Nitro, however, a clean-shaven Hulk Hogan walked out in the black gear, and he better explain himself here because this is just crazy. Hulk says he's dressed like this because he now understands the rules of the game and it's time to take care of business. That's it, there's no further explanation. The crowd boos as Hogan says he defeated Andre the Giant in the Silverdome and he plans on doing the same to his son at Halloween Havoc. Hulk again wants to get things started early on Nitro, but Mean Gene lets him know that the Giant has been barred from the show, so there goes that idea. Hogan then says he wants to give us a Hulkamania history lesson, can't wait. He says back in New York when Hulkamania was running wild, the promoter's ego, Vince McMahon's ego, got bigger than the wrestling business itself. Hulk was looking for a place where Hulkamania could grow, so he took his little Hulkamaniacs with him to WCW. I'm not kidding, by the way, this is what he said. Hogan goes on to say Sullivan and the Giant are burning down the trees in the forest, but Hogan's here to plant the seeds again. Hogan compares Sullivan shaving his mustache to someone graffitiing the Washington Monument or burning the American flag. Again, I'm not kidding. And then the Dungeon of Doom drive up to the arena in their monster truck and security stops them from going any further. I mean, you're in a fucking monster truck, lads. Floor it and don't look back. Hogan then leaves the arena to go find that monster truck and Nitro moves on to its main event. So, in short, Hogan said he understands the rules of the game and that's why he's dressed in black. He's fighting fire with fire, it seems. People try to say this was a heel turn and people use it as a kinda gotcha moment when talking about Hogan's real heel turn at Bash at the Beach 1996, trying to say Hogan turned bad a year before the NWO even existed, but that's just wrong. Hogan was still fighting for his little Hulkamaniacs here, he was still feuding with the Dungeon of Doom, he maybe talked a little more aggressively maybe, but it's still Hulk Hogan trying to be a do-gooder when nobody really cared. This was not a heel turn, maybe it was a small test or experiment, but it wasn't a heel turn. Darkside evil Hulk Hogan then recorded 2 pre-taped promos. one for WCW Saturday Night and one for Nitro. The Saturday Night promo ended the show, and while American Made played in the background, Hogan explained that everything Sullivan said about the evil in Hulk Hogan is true, brothers, but he's using his dark side to protect the training, the prayers, and the vitamins. Hogan says that this side of the Hulkster's been hiding, but it's come out so Hulk can play the Dungeon of Doom's game. If he doesn't do this, then the training, prayers, and vitamins could be left in the hands of the Giant. Hulk then compares the shaving of his legendary mustache to Kevin Sullivan slapping every little Hulkamaniac across the face, and he then says it makes him remember all the little Hulkamaniacs who are no longer with us, those who died of illnesses. Hulk says it makes him want to take all those diseases and eat them alive. Yeah, he bangs on about taking out the Giant at Halloween Havoc, and he wraps it up by saying, "What you gonna do when the shadow of Hulkamania covers you?" Moving on to Nitro, Hogan's now calling the Hulkamaniacs the Manioids, yeah. But the message is the exact same. Hogan's going to protect his 3 demandments. He's talking about putting the Giant down just like Andre the Giant back at WrestleMania 3. And Jimmy Hart gets nervous. He's afraid of what Darkside Hogan is going to do to his enemies. Hulk says, "Fear not, little Jimmy, this needs to be done." On the next episode of Saturday Night, the Master and the Taskmaster say they have a surprise for Hogan at Halloween Havoc. They've only gone to the Himalayas and found themselves a Yeti, who we'll call the Yeti from this point forward. I covered the Yeti previously on the channel, so I won't go into detail here, but just when you think this fuck couldn't get any more clustered, it definitely does. Hogan appears in another pre-tape and he says all the gyms have closed from Venice Beach to Tampa because owners are afraid Hogan's gonna bend and wreck their equipment. Hogan says he's gonna appear on Nitro, he's got a surprise that'll make Sullivan and that big stinky Giant shake in their boots, and Hulk says he's gonna be the most evil person in the building when Nitro comes live from Huntsville, Alabama. He then says when he disposes of the Giant, Hogan's gonna have to dispose of his black gloves and his black bandana. He's also gonna dispose of his dark side, meaning Hogan's probably gonna go back to the red and yellow once he defeats his opponent at Halloween Havoc. So we get to the Nitro before Halloween Havoc, and Hogan cuts a promo here that some of you may remember. He makes reference to the O.J. Simpson trial by saying everyone knows what a man wearing a pair of black gloves and a black rag on his head is capable of. That's not very wholesome there, Mr. Hogan. And Hulk also says he might just keep the black gear after defeating the Giant later in the week. Hogan carries the little Hulkamaniacs on his back as he continues running wild in WCW. Hogan isn't going to lick his wounds anymore though. Hulk's going to get himself a Harley and drag the Giant around until he's no more, and that'll be the end of Andre's son. In regards to Hogan's friends not caring much about this Darkside business, Hogan surprisingly calls out Sting for wearing red and yellow and trying to grow a Fu Manchu, and Hogan calls the Stinger, the Macho Man and Lex Luger little puppies who can all line up to take a shot at Hogan. Hogan seems to be disregarding his babyface friends here and letting them all know he's not their ally anymore. You can completely forget about that though, as Hulk comes out at the end of Nitro to help Randy Savage. He magically no longer needs the neck brace either. Hogan tries to do some damage to the Giant, but the big man no-sells everything and Hulk goes down after a clubbing blow to the back. Hogan hulks up and then the Dungeon of Doom hit the ring. Macho and Hulk fight the Doomers off, and the only thing that can stop Hulk Hogan is head of security Doug Dillinger. Nitro then ends by showing fans the Yeti breaking out of a block of ice, and yep, way to sell a pay-per-view guys, good job. Halloween Havoc 95's been done to death here on YouTube, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but we need to take a quick look in order to understand what happens next with Darkside super evil Hulk Hogan. Hogan wins the Monster Truck Sumo match, but Giant apparently falls to his death afterwards. This match took place on top of Cobo Hall, and yeah, you know the story. But what's interesting here is that the evil, no-good Hulk Hogan actually shows remorse, and he asks for help after Giant takes the plunge. Hogan appears at the end of the show for the main event, and he says there was a terrible accident that happened earlier on, meaning the main event isn't going to happen. But then the Giant just walks down the ramp, and Hogan's reaction says it all really. Schiavone says the Giant is risen from the dead as the challenger steps in the ring, and then the main event goes ahead as planned. Hogan's replaced his mustache with Taskmaster's eyebrows and lightning bolts, and the match plays out like a typical Hulk Hogan bout. He doesn't work heel or anything like that. Turns out Jimmy Hart out-eviled Hulk Hogan when he turns on Hulkamania to join the Dungeon of Doom. Hogan gets his ass kicked, he loses the WCW Championship, and then the Yeti comes out to hump Hogan. A dark cloud over Hulkamania indeed. So Hogan didn't defeat the Giant, and therefore evil Hulk Hogan would stay with us for another little while. Hogan didn't appear on the next episode of Nitro, but on the 6th of November episode we learned that Randy Savage had joined Hulk on the Darkside. Hulk and Savage sit on a bench in Venice Beach along with a random dude who looks completely wasted, and Hulk says he's glad his buddy Randy has joined him on his evil conquest. The Dungeon of Doom are still the targets, but Hogan isn't sure who he can trust anymore. The black do-rag has clearly started affecting his brain and he's getting all paranoid. Randy says don't even sweat it, the Macho Man will go back to the light side on Nitro and he'll find out who the friends are and who the foes are of Darkside Hogan. As for this guy, I have no fucking idea. In the arena, the Dungeon of Doom learned that the World Championship's going to get stripped from the Giant due to the dubious nature of his title win at Halloween Havoc, and whoever wins the World War III Battle Royal will become the new champion. On the following episode of Nitro, the 13th of November episode, that's when the wheels came off, that's when all control was lost, and that's when the drugs kicked in, because there's just no way to make sense of what fans were treated to next. Hulk Hogan, wearing a mask and a dark hooded cloak, carrying a fucking sword, talking absolute unfiltered bollocks for a solid 2 minutes. It starts like this. Hogan says the Dungeon of Doom shake in fear because Hulk Hogan walks around with the power of the training, the prayers and the vitamins. Every creature that breathes Dungeon of Doom is afraid of Hulkamania because the 3 commandments of Hulk Hogan are immortal. Hogan says the brother Randy Savage is on a mission tonight. He's gonna deliver Ming's head on a silver platter later on Nitro. Ming's on the destruction hit list of Hulkamania, and Hogan hopes the Hulkamaniacs are with Randy as he walks on the light side. Evil, batshit crazy Hogan says he doesn't know if Sting's on the dark side or the light side of Hulkamania. Yeah, it's getting confusing. Hogan doesn't know if Sting's friend or foe, so Hogan promises to look at Sting, quote, somewhere in the eye, and see where he's coming from. If Sting's on the Dungeon of Doom side, then Sting's going to get moved to the top of the hit list. The thing is, Sting didn't hint at being a Doomer at all during this time period. He had a troubled friendship with Lex Luger, and Luger was also friendly with the Dungeon of Doom, but not once did Sting ever so much as hint at being a member of the ill-fated faction. Anyway, Hogan tells Macho to bring him Ming's head on a silver platter, and he says, what you gonna do when the Macho Man and Hulk Hogan take the darkness of the Doom and turn it to destroy you? Wouldn't really work on a t-shirt, that one, would it? Savage defeated Ming, but the Doomers and Lex Luger hit the ring before Randy could cut his opponent's head off. And at the end of Nitro, Mean Gene informs Sting that Hogan wants him one-on-one next week on Nitro. Sting says he never thought he'd see the day when Hogan came knocking on his door looking for a fight, but here we are. Sting can let it slide when Hogan talks shit about him before Halloween Havoc by calling him a little puppy, but Hogan needs to realise that around these neck of the woods in WCW, Sting's a big dog. Sting's been through it all in World Championship Wrestling and he's got a pretty long list of victories. Sting won't run away, he's actually looking forward to fighting Hogan next week. Our adventure ends then on the following episode of Nitro, Sting vs Hogan, the 20th of November 1995. This is the closest we get to a heel Hulk Hogan during this short run. It's one thing to go up against the irredeemable Dungeon of Doom, it's another thing to go up against Sting, WCW's most beloved superstar. The fans go nuts for Sting as he wears the red and yellow once again. When Macho Man and Hulk Hogan come up with a plan to catch Sting off guard, the crowd boos. These fans definitely wanted Sting to win here tonight, and throughout the match they continued cheering for the icon. This match actually wasn't all that bad, and it's never really brought up either. It ends with Hogan breaking the Scorpion Deathlock and putting Sting down with a big boot. He goes for the leg drop, Sting dodges it, and Hulk finds himself in the Deathlock again, screaming that Sting's gonna break his leg. The good times end though with the Dungeon of Doom coming down to attack both men. Sting, Hulk and Randy Savage work together to clear the ring, and Nitro ends with Hogan and Sting taking out the Giant with a chair. World War III happened later in the week, and the show started off with Hogan getting rid of the black gear. Hogan said the Hulkamaniacs stuck with him on his walk to the dark side, but he didn't take the final step. Hogan knows who his friends are, he'll never question Sting again. The boys are back in town, and Hogan won't be turning evil again anytime soon. 8 months later, he joined the NWO, and his biggest rival would turn out to be Sting. I'm sure a lot of this can be explained. The shaving of the mustache in Hogan's series of pre-tapes were likely due to Hogan filming a movie, and I'm sure in his head Hogan thought the Darkside stuff was a good idea. Again, maybe to test the waters, maybe to see if it got him a more favourable crowd response. I'm sure it wasn't supposed to come across as bad as it did, but man, some of this stuff was absolute prime WCW Blunder material. As it would turn out, Hogan turning heel would actually be the best thing he could ever do, as evidenced by the New World Order, but it does go to show that things need to be done the right way. Turning heel can be great if it's handled properly. If you're going to show up with a mask and swinging a big sword about the place though, fans might not buy into it. Nothing was ever going to advance or change during this Dungeon of Doom stuff either. It was as one-dimensional as it comes, with Hogan taking on a bunch of unsavoury villains, and trying to deviate away from that evidently would give comical results. It would take a bit more for fans to buy into Hulk Hogan turning to the dark side, and thankfully, that's what happened when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash showed up on Nitro a few months down the road. Thanks for watching this one, guys, and take care. Hulk then compares the shaving of his legendary mustache to Kevin Sullivan slapping every little Hulkamaniac. Hulk then compares the shaving of his fucking hell. Hulk then compares the shaving of his legendary mustache to Kevin Sullivan slapping every little Hulkamaniac. You little Hulkamaniac bastard. Hulk then compares the shaving of his legendary mustache to Kevin Sullivan slapping every little Hulkamaniac across the face. Hulk then compares... Yeah, you little shit. Oh, fuck.